Well, we're picking up where we left off 4 years ago.
That's amazing. I wouldn't think it's been 4 years.
It's just, well, there's so much to do on the railroad, and, well, there's trains to chase and, you know.
Yeah, all that stuff.
So we started working on the coaling tower. It was the very first thing to go into the engine shop area here. There was no engine shop area. There was just a structure. And then that sort of got sidetracked.
Yeah, something like that.
And so we're picking up, and it's like, let's just finish it this time.
Right, brainstorming ideas.
And not set it aside for another 4 years.
Yes.
Of course, the inspiration is that we've been working here in the engine shop area, right where the coaling tower is, because we joined the two halves of the railroad and drove a golden spike right here in front of the coaling tower.
Right.
And so it's like, well, let's just finish up the whole engine shop while we're about it.
Exactly.
So if you saw Tuesday's show, we were working on the ash pit.
Yes.
And we'll be finishing up the ash pit on next Tuesday's show, but there's a lot of small projects like the ash pit here around the engine shop area. But the proverbial gorilla in the room is the coaling tower.
Oh boy, and boy is it ever.
So the ash pit, I think, has turned out quite nicely.
I'm really impressed with it. We brainstormed this quite a while.
And while we still have the entire turntable to do, let's finish up the coaling tower.
Right.
4 years is long enough to have it on a back burner. Well, not even on a back burner, but completely off the stove. Let's get her done. And we actually have a lot of the coaling tower finished. We did a whole series on the coaling tower 4 years ago when we were working on it. And I will build up a playlist of the earlier videos. But it sort of seems like maybe we shouldn't just pick it up from where we left off when there's a 4-year hole in the middle.
Yeah, there's been other things, and this is a giant and imposing here.
So let's take a couple of shows here and get caught up with where we are.
Wow.
Now this is the prototype, and we're very fortunate that one of them has survived.
Isn't that cool?
They had a bunch of these all over the Rio Grande. It was Fairbanks-Morse built. Did you know my grandfather worked for Fairbanks-Morse?
Oh my goodness.
He was an accountant, and he would come to Salt Lake City from Chicago to audit the books.
Ah.
So he may have audited the books on the construction of this coaling tower.
Well, you never know.
We digress. Anyway, Rio Grande had a whole bunch of these, and this is the only one that survives, and barely survives. It tried to tip over a few years ago.
Oh, no way.
And the people working here reinforced it and jacked up the front of it and got it all straight again.
Oh, good.
And there it is.
I know. It's really a cool building.
It hasn't been in regular use for decades. But the Friends of the Cumbers and Toltec have been not only preserving it, they've got it running.
Yes.
And they can use it when they feel like it to load coal into a train.
That's really cool.
They just generally don't.
Right. Preserve it only when necessary.
Now, in modeling this, I had to make some decisions about just what I wanted to include, what I wanted to include, and what I wanted to leave out.
Right.
Because I didn't really want to model the whole thing. So I thought, well, the coal grates here, even though they don't really show from the front, the loading grates are so cool that those have to be modeled. And this whole area back here that's part of that is really neat. But I made the decision not to model the underground part. These long shafts that go down to the bottom of the coaling bin. And looking back now, I wish I'd modeled it.
Oh dear, yeah.
Well, it was like, what's the point? But it's the fun, and looking through these pictures of all the neat mechanism and stuff that's all below ground, it's like, well, that would have been fun.
It would have.
It would have been challenging.
A little bit, yes.
But that's the fun part.
Exactly.
So I am modeling this mechanism, which is, up here with the loading grates. These are the chains that operate the subterranean doors that bring the coal into the buckets. And that definitely shows it's above ground. It's right next to the coal grate, so that has to be modeled, even though I'm not modeling the doors below. At any rate, 4 years ago, our friend Dave Roten, who has Ozark Miniatures in Cedar City, Utah, and Hartford Miniatures, a bunch of different companies, but all under the umbrella of Ozark. I digress. Anyway, he makes wood kits, laser cut kits. He's got a couple of laser cutting systems, and he came out with the Chama coaling tower in 120.3 scale, our scale. And maybe I shouldn't say came out with, he was working on this kit. He was trying to put it together. This was sort of a pre-production model. He'd made 3 of them, and we purchased one of them from him. He said it wasn't complete and that there would be, things that needed to be added to the kit and so on. It didn't have instructions, but it did have a full set of plans, several sheets of plans. Unfortunately, the plans were bigger than the paper that they were printed on, and so they sort of spilled off the edge, but there was enough there that you could figure out what was going on. I started by assembling the coal bin, the gigantic coal bin, and you can see that the corners here use that sawtooth technique, which is so common in laser cut models. In this particular case, however, it's very appropriate because the actual prototype, if you'll notice, is built the exact same way. Each board overlaps the other from the opposing side, creating the exact same kind of zipper effect, I guess you could say. It's a little different on the prototype than it is on the laser model, but the idea is the same. There's a tremendous amount of subframe here, I guess you could say, framework inside and underneath the whole thing, and all of that has been modeled here in the kit and cut out, laser cut from strip wood. There was a sort of an attempt, I guess, at creating coal buckets out of masonite. It didn't work at all. I assembled those and thought, well, not going to use those. I'll scratch build something. We're quite fortunate to have a ton of really good photographs of the prototype. We've been down to Cumbers and Toltec for friends of the Cumbers and Toltec events, even when they were running the coaling tower. So we have good audio of it running, which I intend to use with the model. But we have super, super good documentation on everything, and that's coming in really handy in order to get the whole thing correct.
I thought this was really interesting because one of the things they demonstrated was how these buckets go up and down. And that's just really, really neat.
They opened the chute here. They didn't park a locomotive, but they did demonstrate how the chute works. And they opened it up to just dump. They said they were going to dump out 4 lumps of coal. And I think they actually managed to get just exactly 4 lumps of coal out of here.
Right, and then they wanted to have people pick them up for souvenirs, and nobody would, but I did.
And that way, well, we ground them up into small pieces, so we actually have Chama coal in our Chama coaling tower.
Yes, isn't that cool?
That's very authentic. We are sticklers for details.
Absolutely.
Once I got the coal bin and the outside bracing, most of the outside bracing on the coal bin, all of that rests on top of the hoist house, I guess you could say, the structure at the bottom that contains the motors and pulleys and operator controls and that sort of thing. And right away I could see a significant problem here. I wasn't quite aware of what that problem was, but the entire hoist house building seemed to be too short. Also, you'll notice that there are little filler pieces on the gabled ends to make it wider, and it's like, what in the world is with that? There's also a filler piece to make it taller, if you will notice. Now, the plans are all drawn full size, and I can set these pieces over the plans and they line up, at least they do on one page, but they don't line up on the other page. You'll also notice that the doors and windows are bigger than the openings in the walls. Also, the slope of the roof is different between the two sets of plans. It's like, what in the world? It was then that I realized that one of the sets of plans had been drawn to 20.3 scale. The other set of plans had been drawn to 22.5 scale, which is another popular scale, but it's really necessary for the entire building to be built to the same scale. Well, I was well aware that this kit was sort of a beta test version and that I was going to be running into problems, and yeah, I just ran into one. So I dismantled the lower structure, the hoist house, if you will, and realized I'm going to have to start all over on that and actually scratch build something.
Well, so often in model building this takes place. I've had models that just didn't quite work out, and so you have to be very innovative at times.
And not frustrated.
Oh, you can get frustrated, just don't give up.
Yeah, just find a workaround.
Exactly.
I've often felt like, that it would be easier to just scratch build something than to build the kit, because then at least I know what I'm getting. And I'm not second guessing something.
Right, and sometimes it's just if you're building a building that's unique, it's better to scratch build it.
As it happens, the length of the two long walls were correct in spite of the problems with the scaling. They were just the wrong height.
Yeah.
So I kept the underlying structure and layered that over with the same evergreen plastic that I was building the rest of the building out of. And then I had to add about, I guess, 30 millimeters to the height of the whole thing.
Mm.
The unfortunate thing is that meant that my vertical supports were also 30 millimeters too short, and so I had to splice 30 millimeters into those as well.
Oh my goodness, mathematician time.
Now, another problem is in this little top knot building. I've been calling it the pulley house, because the pulleys are up here.
Right. And something else, we'll just leave that to your imagination.
But it's got that same sawtooth structure that they use on the laser kits, which is inappropriate on this building. Moreover, the siding is running horizontally when it's supposed to be running vertically.
Right.
So I'll keep the basic structure, but I'm going to layer it over with vertical siding.
It'll look a lot better.
Now, for those of you who follow the channel extensively, you may notice I'm using coffee stirs, because we accidentally ended up with, I think it was 20,000 coffee stirs.
Oh, and I was excited because I can just do all kinds of things with those.
We're using them up.
We are.
Anyway, that's what I used here for the vertical siding on the outside of this, because, well, we have them.
Right. We're not really stirring a lot of coffee. Don't get us wrong. We're not quite that bad off yet, but we do use them in our modeling.
The kit didn't have any roof panels, so I just cut those out of some plywood, some of this thin craft plywood that you can pick up at the craft stores. And then I got to build the eaves all the way around, and that was a fun project.
It looks like fun. I like the way those fit together.
I just love doing these little detailed woodworking bits like this. It's just so fun to see how they're coming together.
Yes.
And then cutting out the little rafter ends on the chopper.
And that's hard to do, even with the chopper, to get those right.
And they're teeny.
Yes.
And they have to slide down over the walls. I suppose in a perfect world, I would have actually built the entire rafters and had them sit down, but what they do is they just overlap the outside siding, and that helps hold everything in place.
Right.
And then off to the paint booth.
Oh boy.
Now, figuring out what color to paint anything, this structure is different colors depending on what month you're looking at it, because it's been repainted so many times, and sometimes it's been shot with like a black stain, and then the lower building has been painted numerous times with like a boxcar red, and the pulley house up on top was shot black at one time, and then it was shot with the same boxcar red, if you will. And so it's like, well, I'm going to paint the basic hoist house with the Tuscan, the caboose red, the boxcar red, and then heavy coal dust on it.
I was just going to say, when you're dealing with coal, everything ends up black sooner or later.
And then the pulley house up on top has been black, it's been red, and I kind of like it in the red. So that it's black in the middle and red on the top and bottom. I just think that's kind of a neat look.
It is.
We're kind of overlapping what we're working on right now. We've got a lot of other things to show, but this is actually the last thing I did. I just put this paint on yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
And then 4 years ago, I put the metal roof on it.
Oh, that was a process.
So we'll be diving back into that process. For one thing, we have roof to put on other parts of the building. Mm-hmm. So we have to revisit that same process. And the current project is building the tracks for the coal buckets.
That's going to be a little bit of a job.
The kit came with some of this brass, which is fortunate because I couldn't find any, and it's also super expensive.
Oh.
But I need more of this brass. So I just ordered some brass yesterday, and it should be arriving in the next day or two from K&S Brass.
Nice.
We're not going to have the mechanism operational, but I'd like it to be functional, even though we won't have it actually operate.
Right.
So for the next few weeks, we will be revisiting this project and interleaving with some of the information from 4 years ago. And this time, we'll be finishing the project up.
Right.
Which will include a sound system.
Yes.
Because while we were there, we intentionally recorded all of these sounds so we can include it in the sound system.
Right.
Anyway, hopefully you'll want to follow along with all of this. And so if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. And the easy peasy way to subscribe to the channel is by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Tuesday.
Right.
We have some fun.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.